Your boss paid for this entire honeymoon and for what I do in his bed every Tuesday. Jessica's words hit me like ice water while we sat on the resort balcony overlooking the Caribbean. She swirled her wine glass, smirking at my shocked expression. "What? Did you think your pathetic salary could afford the Ritz-Carlton? Please." I stared at my wife of exactly 48 hours, the woman I'd loved for 3 years, the one who'd whispered forever at the altar last weekend, was casually admitting she'd been sleeping with my boss, David Harrison. Worse, she seemed proud of it. "Cat got your tongue, Tommy?" She laughed, that cruel laugh I'd somehow never noticed before. "Don't look so devastated. This arrangement works for everyone. David gets what he needs, I get what I deserve. And you?" She gestured dismissively. "You get to keep your job." My hands trembled as I sat down like coffee cup. 28 years old, sitting in paradise, and my entire world had just collapsed. But something inside me wasn't breaking. It was hardening. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Oh, honey, since before we got engaged. Did you really think a marketing assistant could afford this ring?" She wiggled her left hand, the 3-carat diamond catching the sunset light. "David has excellent taste." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. Jessica expected me to crumble, to beg, to make a scene. Instead, I excused myself to use the bathroom and pulled out my phone. My college roommate Jake worked in corporate HR for our company's parent organization. We'd kept in touch, and he'd always told me to call if I ever needed anything. The call went to voicemail. Perfect. "Jake, it's Tommy Brennan from Davidson Tech. I need to report a serious HR violation. My boss, David Harrison, has been having an intimate relationship with his subordinate, my wife, Jessica. They've been using company resources for personal expenses, including this resort booking. I have documentation. Call me back immediately." I deleted the call from my recent list, returned to the balcony, and smiled at my wife. "You're right," I said. "This is a beautiful place. Should we order room service?" Jessica looked confused by my calm reaction, but shrugged. "Whatever. I'm going to shower. David's calling at 9 o'clock. As she disappeared inside, I began planning. By tomorrow morning, David Harrison would be out of a job, and Jessica would discover that her sugar daddy had just evaporated. But that was just the beginning. My phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. Jake's text was brief. "Holy hell, Tommy. Check your email in 10 minutes. This is big." Jessica was still asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I'd watched her text David until midnight, probably arranging their morning call. She had no idea what was coming. The email arrived exactly 10 minutes later. David Harrison terminated immediately for violation of company ethics policies and misuse of corporate resources. Security would escort him from the building. This morning. The investigation had revealed over $40,000 in unauthorized expenses, including resort bookings, jewelry purchases, and restaurant bills. But the real bomb was the second email. David's wife, Catherine, had been contacted by HR as a courtesy since some of the charges appeared on company credit cards linked to their shared accounts. I heard the shower running and quickly accessed Jessica's phone. Her passcode was still my birthday. How sentimental. Her recent messages with David painted a clear picture of their relationship. Screenshots saved to my cloud account within minutes. At exactly 8 a.m., someone knocked on our hotel door. "Room service?" I called out cheerfully, though we hadn't ordered anything. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. Catherine Harrison, David's wife, had flown to Barbados overnight. "Jessica," I called toward the bathroom. "Someone's here to see you." The shower stopped. "Who is it?" "A friend of David's," I said truthfully. Jessica emerged in a hotel robe, hair dripping, looking annoyed. She opened the door without checking the peephole. "You must be Jessica," Catherine said calmly. "I'm Catherine Harrison, David's wife. May I come in? The color drained from Jessica's face. She stumbled backward as Catherine entered, carrying a leather portfolio. I received some interesting information from my husband's employer yesterday evening, Catherine continued. It seems David has been creative with his expense accounts. I've spent the night reviewing credit card statements, hotel reservations, and jewelry purchases. Your name appears quite frequently. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Oh, and David won't be taking your call today. He's been terminated, and I've filed for divorce. These are copies of all the receipts I'll be presenting to my attorney. Catherine placed the portfolio on our coffee table. I thought you should know what's coming. I don't, Jessica stammered. Understand? No, I suppose you wouldn't. You see, dear, when you sleep with someone's husband and help them steal from their employer, there are consequences. David will likely face charges. As for you, Catherine smiled coldly. Well, that depends on how cooperative you choose to be in the investigation. After Catherine left, Jessica sat on the bed in stunned silence. I poured myself coffee and watched her process the wreckage of her carefully constructed scheme. This is your fault, she finally whispered. How do you figure? You reported us. You vindictive little man. You reported us. I shrugged. I reported corporate fraud. The adultery was just context. Jessica's face twisted with rage. You think you've won something? You think this changes anything? I'll destroy you for this, Tommy. I'll take everything. With what money? I asked mildly. David's broke. You're unemployed. And I'm pretty sure that ring was purchased with stolen funds. Catherine might want it back. Jessica looked down at her engagement ring as if seeing it for the first time. Her hands started shaking. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed. Actually, I had a very good idea. This was just the opening move. The flight back to Chicago was deliciously uncomfortable. Jessica spent 5 hours alternating between furious silence and hissed threats. Other passengers kept glancing at us, clearly picking up on the tension. I read my book and enjoyed the show. I want a divorce, she announced as we waited for our luggage. I figured, I said. I've already spoken to an attorney. Her eyes widened. When? Yesterday morning, while you were on the phone with David? Or trying to be, anyway. My lawyer, Patricia Mills, had been thorough in our consultation. Illinois was a no-fault divorce state, but adultery could still impact property division, especially when it involved financial misconduct. The documentation I gathered would be crucial. You scheming bastard, Jessica snarled. You planned this whole thing. I reacted to information you freely provided. There's a difference. Our Uber ride home was silent. Jessica stormed into our apartment and immediately began making calls. I could hear her in the bedroom, frantically trying to reach David, then her mother, then her sister. Each conversation grew more desperate. I unpacked methodically, then sat down at my laptop to review our financial situation. Joint checking account, my name on the lease, her car loan co-signed by me. Jessica had always been terrible with money, relying on David's generosity to maintain her lifestyle. Without that income stream, she was drowning. Tommy, she called from the bedroom. We need to talk. I found her sitting on our bed, still in her travel clothes, looking defeated. The fire from earlier had dimmed to smoldering resentment. Look, she said, attempting a conciliatory tone. Maybe we both made mistakes. We can work through this. You slept with my boss for money. I exposed corporate fraud. These aren't equivalent mistakes. I never meant to hurt you. David was persistent. It just happened. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken of her messages. Quote, Tommy's so pathetic he has no idea. I can barely stand letting him touch me when I know what real passion feels like with you. End quote. That was from last Tuesday. Jessica's fake remorse crumbled. You went through my phone. Your passcode is my birthday. You weren't exactly hiding anything. Those messages were private, and now they're evidence. Patricia says they'll be helpful in the divorce proceedings. Jessica stood up, pacing to the window. Fine. You want to play hardball? I know things about you too, Tommy. Things that could ruin your precious career. I waited. She had nothing, but I was curious what she'd invent. That project you've been working on. The Morrison account. I know you've been cutting corners, falsifying data. I could report you to the licensing board. The Morrison account was completed 6 months ago with full documentation and client approval, I said calmly. But please feel free to file a complaint. The investigation will be public record, which means your adultery confession will be part of the testimony. Her shoulders sagged. I want half of everything. Illinois law says you're entitled to an equitable distribution of marital assets. Since most of our assets are actually debts, and you've been unemployed for 2 years, you're welcome to half of our student loans and credit card balances. The apartment is leased in my name, with security deposit and utilities paid by me. You can find somewhere else to live. Jessica sat back down heavily. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Jessica's sister, Lauren, arrived the next morning with a U-Haul and enough righteous indignation to power a small city. She'd apparently heard Jessica's version of events, which painted me as a jealous husband who'd vindictively destroyed an innocent workplace friendship. You're disgusting, Lauren announced, standing in my living room with her hands on her hips. Jessica told me everything. You couldn't handle that she had friends at work, so you made up lies to get David fired. Friends? I repeated. Is that what she's calling it? Just because you're insecure doesn't mean every man who talks to your wife wants to sleep with her. I pulled out my phone and selected one of Jessica's more explicit messages to David. Would you like me to read this aloud, or would you prefer to look at the screenshots yourself? Lauren's confidence wavered. Jessica said you faked those faked text messages from her phone, using her typing patterns and intimate knowledge of David's schedule. I'm flattered you think I'm that clever, but cell phone forensics would easily verify authenticity. While Lauren processed this information, Jessica emerged from the bedroom carrying 2 suitcases. She'd been crying, her makeup smeared and eyes puffy. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy I used to have for her. Then I remembered her smirking face on the hotel balcony, telling me how pathetic I was. Lauren, we need to go, Jessica said quietly. Jess, what exactly did happen with David? Lauren asked. Jessica shot me a venomous look. It's complicated. No, I said. It's simple. Jessica was having an affair with my boss. He paid for her lifestyle with stolen company money. When I reported the fraud, they both got caught. There's nothing complicated about it. Lauren looked between us, understanding dawning on her face. Oh, Jessica, what did you do? I fell in love with the wrong person, Jessica said dramatically, and now Tommy's destroying both our lives for revenge. David's married, Lauren said slowly. With kids. His marriage was already over. We were going to be together once he left Catherine. I almost laughed. Jessica, David threw you under the bus the moment HR called. He's not leaving his wife. He's begging her not to divorce him. Check your messages if you don't believe me. Jessica's face went white. She hadn't heard from David since his termination, despite dozens of calls and texts. He's just processing, she said weakly. He's protecting his assets, I corrected. Catherine's family has money. You were just entertainment. Lauren helped Jessica carry her bags to the truck, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The Saint Jessica narrative was cracking under scrutiny. After they left, I called Patricia Mills to update her on Jessica's departure. That was faster than expected, she said. Most people drag out the denial phase longer. Jessica's practical when cornered. She knows when to cut her losses. Don't underestimate her. Desperate people make unpredictable choices. Watch your back for the next few weeks. Patricia's warning proved prompt. That evening, my phone exploded with notifications. Jessica had posted a lengthy Facebook status describing our mutual decision to separate due to irreconcilable differences. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance who had been forced to leave her home because of my inability to forgive past mistakes. The comments were predictably supportive of Jessica's version. Her friends rallied around her, offering places to stay and sympathy for her situation. Several people made pointed comments about controlling husbands and emotional abuse. I screenshot everything for Patricia, then crafted my own response. I appreciate everyone's concern for Jessica during this difficult time. While I respect her privacy too much to share details publicly, I will say that our separation involves workplace conduct issues currently under investigation by corporate HR and legal counsel. I wish Jessica the best as she faces the consequences of her choices. I posted it and watched the dynamics shift in real time. Suddenly, Jessica's supporters were asking questions. What workplace issues? What investigation? What consequences? Jessica called me 30 minutes later, screaming, "Take that post down right now. You're trying to destroy my reputation." I didn't mention your affair or David's embezzlement. I was actually quite discreet. You implied things. I stated facts. There is a workplace investigation. You are facing consequences. These are true statements. Tommy, please. I'm staying at Lauren's, and her kids are asking questions. You're embarrassing my whole family. You should have considered that before you announced your adultery on our honeymoon. She hung up, but the damage was spreading. Jessica's social media went quiet, but I knew her friends were privately messaging each other, trying to piece together the real story. Small communities love scandal, and Jessica had just painted a target on herself. 2 weeks after our return from Barbados, I received a call from Detective Ray Anderson with the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. David Harrison's case had escalated beyond simple corporate misconduct. Mr. Brennan, we'd like to schedule an interview regarding your complaint against Mr. Harrison, Detective Anderson said. We're finding evidence of broader financial irregularities. We met at the station downtown. Anderson was a stocky man in his 50s with tired eyes and a coffee-stained tie. He'd clearly seen enough corporate corruption to fill several lifetimes. Your initial complaint opened a can of worms, he explained, spreading files across the interview table. Harrison wasn't just stealing for personal expenses. He was skimming from client accounts, inflating project costs, and kickbacks from vendors. We're talking about nearly $500,000 over 3 years. My stomach dropped. I had no idea it was that extensive. Neither did anyone else. He was smart about it, kept the amounts small enough to avoid automatic auditing. But your wife's expenses were too obvious. Resort bookings, jewelry, restaurant bills. Once we started looking, the pattern became clear. Anderson showed me printouts of financial records, highlighting payments to Jessica that I'd never seen. Spa treatments, shopping sprees, even rent payments for an apartment I didn't know she had. Your wife was receiving direct payments from Harrison disguised as consulting fees, Anderson continued. Did you know she was running a side business? Jessica's been unemployed for 2 years? I said numbly. According to tax records, she's been filing as an independent contractor, reporting income from marketing consulting services. The payments correlate exactly with her documented meetings with Harrison. I stared at the papers. Jessica hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been running a professional scam. The woman I'd married was a stranger. We'll need you to review these records and identify any assets or expenses you recognize, Anderson said. Your cooperation will be crucial for prosecution. As I walked through the evidence, the scope of Jessica's deception became clear. She'd maintained a separate bank account, filed fraudulent tax returns, and accepted payments that were clearly not for legitimate services. David had been stealing from the company, and Jessica had been stealing from both David and me. "What happens next?" I asked. "We're building cases against both of them. Harrison will definitely face charges: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Your wife's situation is more complex, but she could be looking at conspiracy charges if we can prove she knew the money was stolen." I left the police station feeling hollowed out. The woman who'd promised to love me forever had been systematically betraying me for years. The honeymoon confession wasn't a moment of cruel honesty. It was her way of gloating about a long-running con. My phone rang as I reached my car.
"Jessica, Tommy, we need to talk," she said urgently. "Can you meet me somewhere?"
"I'm not sure that's appropriate while there's an ongoing investigation." Silence.
"Then what investigation? Detective Anderson didn't mention that when you spoke with him."
"I haven't spoken to any detective."
"Tommy, what's happening?"
I could hear genuine fear in her voice. Now, Jessica had assumed David's termination was the end of it, an employment matter that would blow over quickly. She had no idea about the criminal charges building against them. "You should probably call a lawyer," I said.
"I can't afford a lawyer. David was supposed to. He was supposed to help with expenses, but he won't return my calls. Tommy, I'm scared."
For the first time since Barbados, Jessica sounded like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, frightened, needing protection. My first instinct was to comfort her, to offer help and support. Then I remembered her laughing at me on the balcony, calling me pathetic. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now you get to live with them." I hung up and drove home, feeling both vindicated and empty. Revenge was supposed to feel better than this. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. I found David Harrison sitting in the lobby of my apartment building, looking like he'd been run over by a truck. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his eyes had the desperate gleam of a cornered animal. "Tommy," he said, standing as I approached, "we need to talk." "I don't think that's wise, given the circumstances." "Please, 5 minutes. I know you hate me, but there are things you need to understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked to a coffee shop down the street, David glancing nervously over his shoulder like he expected to be arrested at any moment. "Look," he said, once we'd settled into a corner booth. "I know how this looks, but Jessica, she's not who you think she is."
"Explain."
David rubbed his face with both hands. "The affair, that was real. I won't lie about that, but everything else, the money, the expenses, that was her idea. She convinced me it was harmless, just using company resources for things that benefited employee morale." I stared at him. Employee morale? She said happy employees were more productive, taking her to nice dinners, buying her gifts. It made her more supportive of my work, which made me more effective as a manager. She had spreadsheets, Tommy. Charts showing correlation between her happiness and departmental productivity. "You're telling me Jessica manipulated you into embezzling?" "I'm telling you she's smarter than either of us gave her credit for." The consulting payments were her suggestion too. She said we needed to legitimize the relationship professionally, make it look like she was earning the perks. My mind raced. This version of events painted Jessica as the mastermind and David as the victim. But David had been my boss, a successful executive with an MBA from Northwestern. How could he be outsmarted by my unemployed wife? "Why should I believe you?" I asked. David pulled out his phone and showed me text message threads between him and Jessica. Her messages were calculating, manipulative, filled with business justifications for increasingly expensive requests. Look at the timestamps. David said she initiated every escalation. Every new expense was her idea, presented as a business strategy. I was an idiot for going along with it, but I wasn't the architect. I scrolled through months of messages, seeing Jessica's careful psychological manipulation in action. She'd studied David's insecurities, his need to appear generous and successful, and exploited them systematically. "She's going to let you take the fall for everything," I said, I know. Catherine's divorce lawyer already told me Jessica's claiming she was coerced into accepting the payments. She's painting herself as another victim of my pattern of workplace harassment.
Is that true?
David laughed bitterly. Tommy, your wife chased me for 6 months before I finally gave in. She manufactured reasons to visit my office, wore increasingly revealing outfits to company events, found excuses to text me after hours. I should have stopped it, but I was flattered. A beautiful younger woman wanted me. It fed my ego. And now I'm probably going to prison. My marriage is over. My kids won't speak to me. And your wife is positioning herself as the innocent party who was taken advantage of by a powerful older man. I finished my coffee processing this new information. If David was telling the truth, Jessica's betrayal was even deeper than I'd realized. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been running a long-term psychological operation. What do you want from me? I asked.
Help me prove she was the instigator. You know her better than anyone.
You must have seen signs of this behavior. I thought about our relationship, remembering moments that had seemed odd at the time. Jessica's sudden interest in my work, her questions about company policies, her suggestions for how I could advance my career by being more strategic about office relationships. She was gathering intelligence, I said slowly. About what? Company structure, management personalities, financial processes. She asked me dozens of questions about how expense reports worked, who had access to what accounts, which managers had the most autonomy. David nodded grimly. She used that information to plan her approach with me, knew exactly which buttons to push. We sat in silence for a moment, two men realizing they'd been played by the same woman. The police want to interview you, I said finally. I figure I've got a lawyer now. Catherine's brother, actually. He says cooperation might help with sentencing. Will you tell them about Jessica's role? I'll tell them the truth. What they do with it is up to them. As we prepared to leave, David grabbed my arm. Tommy, be careful. If Jessica realizes you're comparing notes with me, she might try to preempt the narrative. She's already proven she's willing to destroy anyone who threatens her plans. I nodded, but I wasn't worried. Jessica had already played her best cards. What else could she possibly do to me? I was about to find out. My phone was ringing when I got home. Lauren's number.
Tommy, thank God Jessica's in the hospital.
My blood went cold. What happened?
She hurt herself. I found her this morning in my bathroom. There was a note.
Despite everything, my heart clenched. Is she okay?
Physically, yes. But Tommy, the note. She blamed you. She said you drove her to this with your vindictive campaign to destroy her life.
I sat down heavily. Lauren, there are things about Jessica you don't know. I'm starting to realize that the police came to the hospital asking questions about financial records. Jessica's been lying to everyone, hasn't she? It's complicated. No, it's not. She's been playing us all. Lauren's voice was tired, defeated. I found a second phone in her purse while she was unconscious. Text messages with multiple men, not just David. She's been running the same scam on at least 3 other guys. The room spun. Multiple men, company executives, all older, all married. She had profiles on them, notes about their wives, their finances, their weaknesses. Taught me she's been doing this for years. You were just her home base while she worked her marks. I managed to ask where Jessica was hospitalized, then hung up and stared at the wall. The woman I'd married didn't exist. She'd never existed. I'd been living with a professional con artist who'd studied me like a textbook, learned my patterns, exploited my trust. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard about your wife's breakdown. Shame what happens when people's lies catch up with them. -C. Catherine Harrison. David's wife had apparently heard about Jessica's hospitalization. Another text arrived. "Coffee tomorrow? I have information you might find useful." I agreed to meet Catherine, though I couldn't imagine what she might tell me that would make this situation any clearer. I'd thought I was getting revenge on an unfaithful wife. Instead, I'd uncovered a criminal enterprise that had been operating under my nose for years. The next morning, Catherine was waiting at a downtown Starbucks, looking composed despite everything her family was going through. She had maintained her dignity throughout the scandal, handling David's disgrace with remarkable grace.
How are you holding up?
She asked as I sat down. I'm not sure. Yesterday I thought I understood my situation. Now I'm not sure I understand anything. Catherine smiled sadly.
Welcome to my world. I've spent 3 weeks discovering that my husband isn't who I thought he was. But at least he was weak rather than actively malicious. Your wife? She's something else entirely.
Lauren said there were other men. At least 5 that I've identified, possibly more. She's been running a sophisticated operation for years. Each Mark thinks he's her only indiscretion, her one great love affair. She's remarkably good at compartmentalization. Catherine slid a folder across the table. David's lawyer hired a private investigator to build his defense. This is what they found. I opened the folder to find surveillance photos, financial records, and detailed timelines of Jessica's activities. The scope was staggering. She'd been maintaining simultaneous relationships with multiple executives, extracting money and gifts from each while presenting herself as their devoted mistress. The investigator calls it romantic fraud, Catherine continued. She targets successful older men who are vulnerable due to marital problems or midlife crisis. She studies them, identifies their emotional needs, then presents herself as the perfect solution. How did I not see any of this? Because you weren't her mark. You were her cover. The devoted young husband provided legitimacy, explained her schedule inconsistencies, gave her a respectable public identity. She needed you to maintain the illusion. I flipped through photos of Jessica meeting different men at restaurants, hotels, corporate events. Each encounter looked intimate, romantic, special. She'd made every Mark feel like he was her one true love, while simultaneously working 4 other relationships. The hospital incident, Catherine said quietly. That's part of her pattern, too. When one of her previous Marks got suspicious and threatened to expose her, she staged a similar breakdown, generated sympathy, shifted blame to the victim, bought time to disappear. She's done this before. The investigator found evidence of similar operations in 3 other cities over the past 10 years. She moves every few years when things get too complicated. My head was spinning. Who is she really? We don't know yet. Jessica Brennan might not even be her real name. She's remarkably good at creating false identities, establishing credit histories, building believable backstories. Catherine gathered the photos back into the folder. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what you're dealing with. David made terrible choices, but he was manipulated by a professional. You were too. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I thought about Jessica in the hospital playing the victim one more time, preparing to paint me as the villain in her latest performance. I'm going to finish what I started, I said. The plan came together over the following week. Catherine's private investigator had done excellent work, building a comprehensive profile of Jessica's criminal enterprise. Detective Anderson was fascinated by the evidence, particularly the financial records, showing systematic fraud across multiple states. This changes everything, he told me during our meeting. Your wife isn't just an adultery case. She's running a multi-state fraud operation. The FBI will want to get involved. Federal charges would mean serious prison time, assuming we could prove the case. But first, we needed Jessica to incriminate herself. The opportunity came when she was released from the hospital. Lauren called to tell me Jessica wanted to meet to work out a civilized divorce settlement without lawyers. She's scared, Lauren admitted. The police questions spooked her. She knows something big is coming. We arranged to meet at a restaurant downtown, neutral territory where Jessica would feel safe. What she didn't know was that I'd be wearing a wire, courtesy of Detective Anderson's investigation. Jessica looked terrible when she arrived. Thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. The polished sophistication she'd always maintained was gone, replaced by desperate exhaustion. She sat across from me in the booth, hands trembling as she ordered coffee.
"Tommy, I need your help," she said without preamble.
"I'm listening."
"The police think I knew about David's activities, but I didn't. I was just as much a victim as you were."
I nodded sympathetically. That must be scary.
"It is."
And there are other men asking questions now. Guys I used to know. They think I was involved in some kind of scheme, but I was just trying to network professionally. You know how important connections are in business. Other men. Jessica's eyes flickered. She realized she'd said too much.
"Just colleagues, people I met at industry events. But they're misunderstanding innocent relationships because of the publicity around David."
How many colleagues are we talking about?
"It doesn't matter."
The point is, I need you to tell the police that I never discussed David's finances with you, that I had no access to company information.
I leaned forward. "But you did ask me about expense reporting procedures."
Only general questions. I was curious about your work, trying to be a supportive wife, and the consulting payments you received.
"How do I explain those?"
Jessica's mask slipped completely.
"You know about those?"
The police showed me the records. $50,000 over 18 months, Jessica. For what services? She was quiet for a long moment, calculating. When she spoke again, her voice was harder.
"I provided legitimate marketing consultation. David can confirm that."
David's telling the police you orchestrated the entire scheme. He's lying to protect himself.
"Is he?"
Because I've seen your text messages, Jessica. The ones where you suggested ways to justify the expenses, recommended amounts that would avoid auditing, coached him on how to categorize the payments. Jessica's face went white.
"You can't use those. They're privileged marital communications. Actually, they're evidence of criminal conspiracy. And since you were texting David from my computer, sometimes they're not even private."
She stared at me across the table, finally understanding that I'd been building a case against her for weeks. The scared, vulnerable woman from the hospital was disappearing, replaced by cold calculation.
"What do you want?"
she asked. The truth. All of it.
"How many men?"
How much money? How long this has been going on? You're wearing a wire. It wasn't a question. Jessica's survival instincts were finally kicking in.
"Yes,"
I said. She stood up slowly, grabbing her purse.
"You think you're so smart, don't you? The good little husband getting his revenge. But you have no idea what you've stepped into."
Enlighten me. Jessica leaned down, speaking quietly so only I could hear.
"There are people involved in this who make David Harrison look like a Sunday school teacher.
Men with real power, real money, who won't appreciate having their business relationships exposed."
"You think this ends with me going to jail?"
She straightened up, speaking louder now for the benefit of the recording equipment.
"I have nothing more to say without my attorney present. And Tommy, watch your back. You've made enemies you don't even know about."
Jessica walked out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting in the booth with a wire recording her implied threats. Detective Anderson would be pleased. Threatening a witness was another charge they could add to her growing list. But her warning bothered me. What if Jessica's operation was bigger than we'd discovered? What if there were other players we hadn't identified? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Smart move with the wire, but this isn't over, Jay." I looked around the restaurant, expecting to see Jessica watching from somewhere. But she was gone. The message could have been sent from anywhere. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt genuinely afraid. The fear was justified. Over the next 3 days, I received anonymous calls at all hours, hang-ups when I answered. My car was keyed in the parking garage. Someone went through my mailbox, leaving the contents scattered on the lobby floor. Jessica was sending a message. She could reach me anytime, anywhere. Detective Anderson assigned a patrol car to drive by my building periodically, but there was only so much they could do about harassment that left no concrete evidence. Jessica was careful, always staying just inside the boundaries of legal intimidation. "She's trying to make you withdraw your cooperation," Anderson explained during our meeting. "It's a classic pressure tactic. The question is whether she's working alone or if she has help." The answer came on Friday evening. I was leaving my office building when a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The rear window rolled down, revealing a man in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "get in." It wasn't a request. Two larger men flanked the car, making it clear that refusing wasn't an option. I climbed into the back seat, my heart hammering. "My name is Richard Blackwood," the older man said as the car pulled into traffic. "I believe you know my associate, Jessica Blackwood." I'd seen that name in Catherine's investigator files. One of Jessica's marks, a venture capitalist with connections throughout the city's financial district. "Jessica and I have a mutually beneficial relationship," Blackwood continued. "Or rather, we did until you decided to play detective. She was stealing from multiple companies. Someone had to stop talking." His voice cut through my explanation like ice. "Jessica provides valuable services to select clients. Information gathering, relationship management, competitive intelligence. What you call fraud, we call business." The car was heading toward the lakefront, away from populated areas. I tried to memorize the route, but the tinted windows made it difficult to see landmarks. "Your investigation threatens a network that generates millions in revenue annually," Blackwood said. Jessica's relationship with Harrison was just one small piece of a larger operation. "Industrial espionage," I said, understanding finally clicking into place. "Information is the most valuable commodity in modern business. Jessica excels at acquiring it through personal relationships. Her targets volunteer secrets they'd never share in a boardroom." The car stopped at a warehouse district near Navy Pier. Through the windshield, I could see Jessica waiting by a loading dock. No longer the broken woman from the hospital. She looked professional. Dangerous. "Here's what's going to happen," Blackwood said. "You're going to withdraw your complaint against Jessica. Tell the police you were mistaken about her involvement. Focus their attention on Harrison. He's expendable." "And if I refuse?" Blackwood smiled without warmth. "Your apartment building has excellent fire suppression systems, but accidents happen. Your sister's law practice handles a lot of cash transactions. The IRS might find irregularities worth investigating. Your mother's nursing home could discover problems with her insurance coverage. The threats were specific, personal. They'd done their homework on my family. You have until Monday morning to contact Detective Anderson," Blackwood continued. "After that, we start making phone calls." The car door opened. I was expected to get out. "Mr. Brennan," Blackwood called as I stood on the loading dock. "Jessica speaks very highly of your intelligence. Don't disappoint her by making this complicated." The sedan drove away, leaving me alone with Jessica in the growing darkness. "I told you this was bigger than you understood," she said, walking closer. "But you wouldn't listen. How long have you been running industrial espionage?" "Since I was 22. Started with a small accounting firm in Minneapolis, worked my way up to major corporations. I'm very good at what I do." "And the marriage? Was any of it real?" Jessica considered the question seriously. "I needed a stable base of operations in Chicago. You provided that. But there were unexpected complications, such as I started to care about you. Not love. I'm not sure I'm capable of that anymore. But genuine affection. It made the job harder. So you decided to destroy me instead. I decided to end things cleanly. The honeymoon confession was supposed to drive you away, make you file for divorce without asking questions. But you had to be clever about it. We stood facing each other in the empty warehouse district, the city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in the distance. This woman had shared my bed for 3 years, promised to love me forever, built a life based entirely on lies. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you. Blackwood's offer is generous. Walk away, let Harrison take the fall, and everyone gets to move on with their lives, including you." "I'll disappear. New identity, new city, new operation. You'll never see me again." "And if I don't cooperate?" Jessica's expression hardened. "Then we make you cooperate. Blackwood has resources you can't imagine. Politicians, judges, police commanders, people who owe favors or have secrets to protect." I looked at the woman I'd married, finally seeing her clearly. She wasn't evil, exactly, but she was completely amoral. Other people were just tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. "I need time to think," I said. "You have until Monday morning." A taxi was waiting at the end of the dock. Jessica had planned every detail of this encounter. As I rode back to civilization, I tried to process what I'd learned. Jessica wasn't just my cheating wife. She was a professional spy who'd been extracting corporate secrets for a criminal organization. My investigation had accidentally stumbled into something far more dangerous than simple adultery. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. I spent the weekend planning, knowing it might be my last chance to act freely. Monday morning would bring either capitulation or escalation, and I refused to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Saturday morning, I called Catherine Harrison and requested an emergency meeting. "Tommy, what's wrong? You sound terrible." I told her everything. Blackwood, the threats, Jessica's real profession. Catherine listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "My God," she breathed when I finished. "We've stumbled into organized crime. It explains why Jessica was so confident. She knew she had backup." Catherine was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Richard Blackwood," she said finally. "I've heard that name at charity events. He's connected to half the power brokers in this city. Which means he can probably make his threats stick. Maybe. But he's also vulnerable. If Jessica's been running industrial espionage operations, there are federal agencies that would be very interested in that information." Catherine was right. Corporate espionage fell under FBI jurisdiction, and they had resources that local police couldn't match. The question was whether we could get their attention before Blackwood shut us down. "I have contacts at the Tribune," Catherine said, "investigative reporters who specialize in corporate corruption. If we can get this story into the press, it becomes much harder to suppress." We spent the morning crafting a comprehensive timeline of Jessica's activities, cross-referencing the private investigator's findings with my own evidence. The pattern was clear once we laid it out. A systematic operation targeting executive-level employees across multiple industries. Catherine's journalist friend, Maria Santos, met us Sunday afternoon at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She was a veteran reporter with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking down corrupt officials. "This is explosive," Maria said, reviewing our documentation. "If you're right about the scope of this operation, we're talking about hundreds of millions in stolen trade secrets." "Can you run the story?" Catherine asked. "Not without more sources. I need someone inside the operation willing to go on record, or law enforcement officials confirming an active investigation." "What about David?" I suggested. "He's cooperating with police already." Maria nodded. If Harrison can verify the industrial espionage angle, that might be enough to justify publication. But you both need to understand, once this story runs, there's no going back. These people will come after you with everything they have. "They're already threatening my family," I said. "At least this way we fight back." We arranged for Maria to interview David Harrison that evening, hoping his testimony would provide the corroboration she needed. If everything went according to plan, the story would run in Monday's edition, just hours before Blackwood expected my surrender. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. Every car that passed my building, every footstep in the hallway made me jump. Jessica's threats had gotten inside my head exactly as intended. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. "Having trouble sleeping?" Jessica's voice was soft, almost intimate. "I understand. Big decisions are always stressful." "How did you get this number?" "I lived with you for 3 years, Tommy. I know all your numbers, your accounts, your passwords. Breaking into someone's life is what I do. The Tribune is running a story tomorrow morning." Silence on the line. "Then I was hoping you'd be smarter than that. The FBI will be very interested in your industrial espionage operation. The FBI will find a dead journalist and a murder-suicide involving a bitter divorce. Very tragic, very believable." My blood went cold. "You're threatening Maria Santos." "I'm explaining consequences. Last chance to reconsider." The line went dead. I immediately called Maria's number, getting voicemail. Then I tried her cell phone. Same result. Either she was asleep with her phone off, or something had already happened to her. 20 minutes later, I was in my car heading toward Maria's Lincoln Park apartment. The streets were empty at this hour, giving me clear visibility of any vehicles that might be following. I couldn't spot a tail, but that didn't mean I was alone. Maria's building was dark. No lights in her third-floor windows. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching for movement, then decided to risk it. The building's front door was secured, but I could see the lobby through the glass. No sign of trouble. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria's number. "Story killed. Go home." But something felt wrong. Maria had been excited about the investigation, convinced it could be a career-making story. She wouldn't abandon it without explanation. I called the Tribune's night desk and asked to speak with the editor on duty, Maria Santos. The editor said she called in sick tonight, won't be in until Wednesday. Did she file any stories before calling in? Nothing scheduled for tomorrow's edition. Is this regarding a news tip? I hung up without answering. Maria had been neutralized one way or another. The story wouldn't run, and I'd lost my best chance to expose Blackwood's operation before Monday morning. But I wasn't finished yet. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I had one last card to play, but it would require walking directly into Blackwood's territory. Detective Anderson had been surprised by my early morning call, requesting an immediate meeting, but he'd agreed to see me at the station. What he didn't know was that I'd already sent copies of all our evidence to the FBI's Chicago field office, along with a detailed explanation of Blackwood's threat. "You look terrible," Anderson said when I arrived at his office. "What's happened?" I told him about Friday's kidnapping, the threats against my family, and Maria Santos's sudden disappearance. Anderson's expression grew increasingly grim as the story unfolded. "Industrial espionage," he muttered. "That explains why your wife was so confident about beating the charges." "She's not just my wife. She's a professional spy working for a criminal organization, and they're willing to eliminate anyone who threatens their operation." Anderson was already reaching for his phone. "We need federal backup for this. If Blackwood has the kind of connections you're describing, this is way above our pay grade." "I've already contacted the FBI. Agent Patricia Coleman should be calling you within the hour." "Good thinking. In the meantime, we're putting you in protective custody. No, I need to end this today before they hurt anyone else." Anderson stared at me. "Tommy, these people threatened to harm your family. This isn't the time for heroics." "It's exactly the time. Blackwood expects me to call you this morning and withdraw my complaint. Instead, I'm going to his office and confronting him directly." "That's insane." "Maybe, but it's also unexpected. He thinks he's broken me, that I'm too scared to fight back. If I show up at his office with evidence of federal involvement, it might shake his confidence enough to make mistakes. Anderson shook his head. Or it might get you eliminated. Then make sure the FBI knows where I've gone. I left the police station against Anderson's strong objections, but with his promise to coordinate with federal agents. If my plan worked, Blackwood would find himself facing charges that no amount of political influence could dismiss. If it failed, at least the investigation would continue without me. Blackwood's office was located in a gleaming downtown high-rise, occupying the entire 42nd floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending to my own execution, but I'd committed to this course of action. The receptionist was expecting me. "Mr. Brennan, Mr. Blackwood is waiting in the conference room." She led me through a maze of expensive offices, past windows offering spectacular views of Lake Michigan. Everything about the space screamed legitimate success, the perfect cover for criminal activities. Blackwood was sitting at the head of a polished conference table when I entered. Jessica sat to his right, looking professional in a navy business suit. Two other men flanked the table, probably security, though they wore expensive suits rather than obvious muscle. "Mr. Brennan," Blackwood said without standing. "I trust you've had time to consider our conversation." "I have, and I've decided to reject your offer." Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained calm. "That's disappointing. May I ask why?" "Because you're criminals, and I don't negotiate with criminals." Jessica leaned forward. "Tommy, you're making a mistake. These people don't make empty threats." "Neither do federal agents. Agent Coleman sends her regards, by the way." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Blackwood's composure cracked just slightly, a tightening around his eyes that suggested genuine concern. "You've involved the FBI," he said. "It wasn't a question. Industrial espionage is a federal crime. So is threatening witnesses in an ongoing investigation." "What investigation? You've withdrawn your complaint." "Actually, I've expanded it. The FBI now has evidence of your entire operation: financial records, surveillance photos, recorded conversations." Jessica's little confession on Friday was particularly helpful. I was bluffing about the recorded conversation, but Blackwood didn't know that. His calm mask was slipping, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "You're lying." "Am I? Then why haven't you received any calls from your contacts in city government this morning? Could it be because they're all distancing themselves from a federal investigation?" One of the security men whispered something in Blackwood's ear. His expression darkened further. "It seems," Blackwood said slowly, "that you've been more thorough than I anticipated." "I had good teachers. Jessica showed me how to plan ahead, how to gather evidence, how to manipulate people into revealing their secrets. I learned from the best." Jessica was staring at me with something that might have been admiration. "You sneaky bastard," she said softly. "You've been playing us since Friday night." "I've been protecting myself since you decided to threaten my family." Blackwood stood up, his movement triggering similar responses from his security team. "Mr. Brennan, you've made a serious error in judgment. The FBI may be interested in our business activities, but federal investigations take years to complete. We have more immediate resources at our disposal. So did David Harrison. Look how that worked out for him." The conference room door opened, and Agent Patricia Coleman entered with 3 other federal agents. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with dangerous criminals. "Richard Blackwood," she announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and industrial espionage." The security men reached inside their jackets, but stopped when they found themselves facing drawn weapons. "Jessica Brennan," Coleman continued, "you're also under arrest on the same charges, plus fraud and witness intimidation." As the agents moved to handcuff their prisoners, Jessica looked at me one last time. "This won't end here," she said. "There are others, people you haven't identified. This operation is bigger than just Chicago." "Then I guess the FBI has more work to do." Jessica smiled as the handcuffs clicked into place. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Agent Coleman approached me as her team led the prisoners toward the elevators. Nice work, Mr. Brennan. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. The wire you were wearing picked up everything. Blackwood's threats, Jessica's confession about the espionage operation, the security team reaching for weapons should be enough to put them away for a long time. I touched my chest, feeling the small recording device Anderson had insisted I wear despite my protests. I forgot I had it on. Lucky break. This investigation is going to expand significantly based on what we learned today. You may need to stay in protective custody for a while. As we walked toward the elevators, I looked back at the conference room where I just destroyed the woman I'd once loved. Jessica was gone. Blackwood was finished. And I was finally free. But her parting warning echoed in my mind. This operation was bigger than Chicago. There were others out there running similar schemes, exploiting trust for profit. The elevator doors closed, and I found myself thinking about the future for the first time in months. Whatever came next, at least I'd face it with the truth instead of lies. The trial lasted 3 months. Jessica pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy charges in exchange for cooperation against other members of the espionage network. Her testimony led to arrests in 6 states and the dismantling of a criminal organization that had operated for over a decade. Blackwood refused to cooperate and received a 20-year sentence. His political connections proved worthless once federal prosecutors began investigating his campaign contributions and lobbying activities. David Harrison received 5 years probation in exchange for his cooperation. His marriage didn't survive the scandal, but he avoided prison time. We never spoke again after the investigation concluded. I kept my job, received a promotion, and slowly rebuilt my life. The apartment felt empty without Jessica's presence, but it was a clean emptiness, rather than the poisonous atmosphere of her deception. Agent Coleman stayed in touch, updating me on the broader investigation. Jessica's network had been responsible for stealing trade secrets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, passing corporate intelligence to foreign competitors, and manipulating stock prices through insider information. She was telling the truth about one thing, Coleman told me during our final meeting. This was bigger than any of us realized. Your wife was just one operator in a much larger system. 6 months after the arrests, I received a letter forwarded through the federal prison system. Jessica's handwriting was still elegant, still deceptively innocent. Tommy, the letter read, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, but I want you to know that what I felt for you was as real as I'm capable of making it. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserve the truth. I hope you find someone who can love you the way you loved me, completely, honestly, without reservation. Thank you for stopping me before I became something even worse. Jay, I read the letter once, then burned it in my kitchen sink. Some chapters of life need to end completely without the possibility of reopening old wounds. But late at night, sometimes I still wonder about the woman I married. Was Jessica ever real, even for a moment? Or was she always just a character played by a professional liar who got too comfortable in the role? I suppose it doesn't matter now. The truth was ugly, but it was still the truth. And I'd learned that sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about saving yourself from becoming like them. The marriage was over. The investigation was closed. Justice had been served. Turf, 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 turf.